Ulahang Domingo kanatong tanan. Happy New Year and Happy Three Kings or Happy Epiphany. Daghan kay tag mga greetings ng adlaw. Actually, as tradition would always hold, today being the Feast of the Epiphany, we have to get to know at least some of the important movable feasts of the year 2019, of this current year. So, to start, Ash Wednesday for this year will be on March 6. Easter Sunday, April 21. Ascension Sunday will be June 2. Pentecost will be June 9. And Christ the King, being the last Sunday of the liturgical cycle, will be on November 24. So this is a tradition that actually would somehow guide us in the sense that the Epiphany is basically a solemnity or a feast that is always understood with the guidance of the star. And as we are guided by these dates, as we move in our journey in the liturgical calendar, we are also asked to be constantly prepared for the many important feasts or solemnities or celebrations that we have to take into account. Today's gospel reading, which is only found and can only be found, whatever cycle there is in the liturgical calendar, is always Matthew's account of the visit of the Magi. And that's the reason why it is called, today is also called the Feast of the Three Kings. However, the names that we have of the three kings as Gaspar, Balthasar, and Melchior came very later in the century after the birth of Christ, when it became a particular devotion and identification. But at the same time, it is our way of entering into the dynamism of such a solemnity, because today is still Christmas, because today, Epiphany means the Lord has revealed Himself to all the nations, represented by the pagans, or the three kings, or the three magi, or the three philosophers. That is why in the Eastern Orthodox countries, today is still their Christmas day, while we in the Latin Rite celebrate December 25 as our Christmas. But what is of most significant consideration and aspect of this celebration? I would rather like to reflect with you the last verse of the gospel reading. What is that last verse? After having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed for their country by another way. This is a very significant moment in understanding, especially part of our journey of the faith. To go another way, to take another pathway, which is basically what we call change of life, what we call metanoia or conversion. Now, when the three men were revealed to them not to return back to Herod, who actually had some plans against the child, because he was really very perplexed, because another king is born, and he was the current king at that time. The angel told them to depart by taking another way. And this is actually the challenge of Christian life. We are always asked and reprimanded sometimes in order to take on the way that the Lord wants us to follow. Well, there is a very interesting play on words and expression here. The Feast of the Epiphany, or the Solemnity of the Epiphany, is actually talking about a way of revelation or a manner of revelation. Because in theology, we are being taught that God reveals in different ways. And there are three kinds of revelations that we call in theology as, first, theophany. And then we have today's solemnity, Epiphany. And there is the generic term of God's revelation, which is called diaphany. Okay? So what is theophany? Theophany is God revealing Himself by using all the powers of nature, earthquake, whirlwind, clouds, that we actually listen and read in the Gospels and in the in the Bible. When God reveals the prophets, the prophet Elijah, for example, when Jesus in the New Testament actually was transfigured, that was a theophany. It was God revealing himself. But this kind of revelation is somehow related to some special people that he has chosen to reveal himself. Now, Epiphany, on the other hand, is revealing himself to all the world. And this we take into account the pagans or the non-Jewish or the non-Israelites who also were able to recognize the birth of the Messiah, the fulfillment of God's promise. That's why it's called Epiphany. Pagpahayag, pagpadayag sa tibuok kalibutan. And this is general. Now there is another kind of revelation that we call diaphany, which is actually revealing through other means, because God can do that in many different ways. That is the way of revelation. Today is a way of revelation, Epiphany. But it changes into something very significant and challenging. Because the way of revelation, which is Epiphany today, reveals to us a way of life. No? So the way of revelation, and then the revelation of a way. And what is this pathway? What is this way? The way that we live in many different manners as well, but in goodness and in accordance to the plan and the will of God. In our world now, we have so many ways. There are so many ways that we have heard. Sometimes color-coated with goodness. But sometimes there is so important. It's so important to know the root of such a color-coated way of life or goodness. Because we cannot just compromise things if we want to have goodness or success in the world. We have to be aware as well of the manner of doing things. And that is according to the way that the Lord wants us to follow. And that way is His will. And that way is the commandment. And that's the reason why we may be tempted to agree with certain solutions to the problems of society. But as Christians, we have to be aware that there is something that would guide us. And that is the guiding star. The guiding star, or the light of light, the light from light, true God from true God, begotten, not made. So when we actually profess our faith. And this is what we have to struggle day to day, especially in wanting to solve problems in society nowadays. It is not just a matter of randomly saying, let's solve this problem. No, but we have to keep track with the way and the manner that the Lord has shown us. And this is a very important starting point. That's why today not only we are informed, or it is announced to us what are the important feasts of the liturgical calendar. But behind it, there is an interesting and important reason, because our lives should be guided by such a pathway that leads to Him. Many people would take another way, but it only leads to one and the same thing, for as long as it is good, it is moral, it is true, it is acceptable, and it is beautiful, not only in our eyes, but pleasing in the sight of God. Amen.